So you have a project that you want to create and you want to put it inside of source control, specifically using Git. So how do we go about doing that in Visual Studio? So when you create a new project, what you'll want to do is go through the process of identifying the type of project you want to create. I'll just create a console application and we'll just call this sample console app. It's going to go into my Visual Studio projects folder, and that's all fine. But when you're creating your new project, you want to make sure you check this little box here that says add to source control. And what that will do is it will then add a step in the project creation to ask you what kind of source control you do want to use. So we'll hit OK. So the scaffolding will go through, it'll create our project for us, and then once Visual Studio has actually generated that project, it will come back and say, okay, we have a project. What kind of source control repository do you want to use for that project? With Visual Studio 2015, you get two choices. You can do Team Foundation Server version control or Git. Well, as you know from previous videos, Git is the source control that we'll be using for this class. So you'll want to select Git, you'll want to hit OK, and a Git repository is then created for your project. The project then is added to that repository and everything is put in place. Now, things look pretty much the same as they normally would. So how do you know that a repository was made? Well, in your Solution Explorer, you'll notice there is probably another tab called Team Explorer. It's not labeled very well, but that Team Explorer is the tab that you would use for managing your repository. So you have these hosted solutions up above. Those are all great, but we don't care about those. We're looking at the local Git repository. And you'll see here that under my local path, there's my sample console app, and it says that I have one local Git repository. I'm going to double click on that, and it'll open up with a couple of different actions or tasks. So you'll see here that I have my solution file, and I'm going to go to Changes, and under Changes, it will show me all of my project files listed, and currently they're all marked as included changes. So since I just created this project and I just put it inside of this new local repository, everything needs to be added or saved or committed to the repository. So I need to add a comment, and I'll say first commit. And then after I move out of that, I should be able to commit. Oh, but I have a notice here that says that I need to configure my username and email address. So let's go ahead and click configure. And it just pulled information from my profile. You may need to fill in these boxes, but you just put in your name, email address, and then where you would like those repositories to live. That's really up to your discretion as to how you want to configure that. I'm just going to leave it as the default, and I'm going to hit update. Now these are global Git settings is what we're setting here. So we want to make sure that those are set appropriately. So once you've got those in place, go ahead and hit the little home here on your Team Explorer. Let's go back to changes again. We've got our comment in for the commit, and we hit commit, cross our fingers, and we have our first successful commit. Now, this little console screen is nice, or a little modular screen is nice, but if you go back to the Solution Explorer, let's say we just do a simple hello world line of code here, and we've essentially made a change to our project. Well, you'll notice first of all that the program.cs now has a little red check mark next to it. It says pending edit. If we look at our app config, there's a lock next to it, and Visual Studio is not going to tell me anything, but that's just showing that that change has been committed and you're currently running on the latest version. So if we want to push our program.cs file up to our repository or into our repository, we can right click on it and we can choose commit. Now we can commit this, and this will basically commit that single file to the repository. Another option is, let's say you're working on a project, you've got multiple classes, you have multiple forms, or maybe you're dealing with models, views, and controllers for a web type app, whatever the case may be. Any files that are added or changed in your solution, you can actually go up to the solution itself, right click just the same, and choose commit. and then any and all files within the solution will then be brought in for that next change. So again, we'll say hello world code, and that's kind of just our comment for the commit. You have to make sure you put a comment with every commit, otherwise Git won't let you actually complete the commit. So this will be our comment for the commit. It can be relevant to the changes you've made, just as a reminder to say, hey, these are the changes that I'm committing. You can just put in some random stuff if you're just wanting to really quickly push a change in. But you put in a comment, you'll see the files that you're committing, you hit the commit button, and those changes are now committed. As simple as that. You'll notice here that each commit is given a unique identifier. You can actually click on those unique identifiers and you can see those commits. You'll see here it says there's a parent commit. I can click on that and then it shows me my first commit, and inside of that commit I can see all the files that were committed during that particular commit. Now, one of the nicest things about using Git and having this local repo is that, let's say I decide I want to change this line of code and I want it to be console write line. I want to say goodbye world. And so I made this change. Maybe I've made a few other changes, and all of a sudden I go, I kind of liked the code I had before, and I don't remember what it said. So you can go back to program.cs, you can right click on it, and you can actually do a compare with the unmodified version. So it'll actually go and pull the file from the repository that you had previously committed, and it'll do a comparison right within Visual Studio to show you the change that was made. So from here we can see that when we committed last, we committed hello world, then we changed it to goodbye world, and the change occurred on line 13, and it actually even highlights the specific change and says the word hello was changed to the word goodbye. So you have that ability to do that. If you want to maybe copy this line out and reuse it in some way, you can obviously just copy here and then paste it here and get that data retained or moved back over. So you have that functionality to do that. I'm going to go ahead and close this diff, and then we're back to where we were. So you have a little bit more control from within Visual Studio to be able to do different things. So this is kind of just the rough getting going with using Git inside of Visual Studio, but it's very powerful and it's very simple to use between just doing the right-click commits and the ability to then kind of navigate your team or your repository and see what's going on.